Okay, 81b, about halfway down the page, the two dots. Shmor li v'omer lo hanach lefonai shemer chinam.
Say that again, please. I'm sorry.
But halfway down, 81b.
81?
81b.
Oh.
Hey, Aleph and base.
Oh.
Okay, so basically he says they have an arrangement as follows. The guy, somebody needs this item to be watched, and he says, "Can you watch it?" So he says, "Put it down in front of me." The law is he has the status of a shemer chinam. So Rav Huna says, "Amar lo hanach lefanacha, ena lo shemer chinam v'lo shemer sachar." Let's say the guy said, instead of saying hanach lefanai, put it in front of me, he says, put it in front of yourself. That's a nice way of telling the guy that he's not watching it. He's not a watchman at all. Now, so now we have sort of a contrast here. If he says, put it in front of yourself, he's not a shomer at all. He's not a watchman. If he says, put it in front of me, he is a watchman. What happens if he didn't say anything? He said, hanach, leave it. Did that make him a shomer or not? Ibolu, hanach stoma, mai. Toshma, let's examine this. Shmor li v'omer lo hanach lefonai shemer chinam. The guy says, put it in front of me, and he did, then he's a shemer chinam. Hastama, but if he didn't specify in front of me, v'lo klum, then he wouldn't be a watchman at all. Gemara says, adrab, to the contrary. Midar Rav Huna, hanach lefonecha, hu de'ena lo shemer chinam v'lo shemer sachar, hastam shemer chinam hava. Well, let's examine this from the opposite angle. Rav Huna says, put it in front of yourself. That's sort of derogatory, right? So that means I don't want to watch it at all. Tell the guy who wants me to watch it, I tell him, put it in front of yourself. But if I didn't tell him, put it in front of yourself, instead I said, just leave it, then I would be a shomer. So the implications are contradictory. And therefore the conclusion is, from here, we're not able to bring sufficient proof. Let's say this debate is dependent on the following machlokes. Okay, this is a scenario of, this goes back to Kamma, 1 second. Yeah. Basically, a guy loaded his barrels and put it into his friend's property, and damage accrued to them. So his friend is exempt. Except, let's say he had permission to put his barrels there, then the owner of the courtyard is liable. Rabbi says, you wouldn't be liable unless the owner has accepted the responsibility to watch it. Okay, now it would seem, according to Rebbe, you need a very deliberate accepting. You need to accept. You need not just to allow the guy to keep his barrels there, but also to accept responsibility. According to the first opinion, you don't need to. Letting the guy put his barrels in your property is sufficient to make you liable as a shemer chinam. So let's argue that the debate here is the same. Meaning, according to Rebbe, hanach alone, leave it there, does not make you a shomer. It's only that I have to say hanach lefanai, meaning I accept the responsibility to watch it. And according to the first opinion, just the fact that you have permission, you're allowed to put it there, is sufficient. Therefore, hanach would be enough to make you into a shomer. So the Gemara says, the Gemara rejects this comparison. It could be the rabbis say that generally speaking, telling somebody to leave it does not mean that you're accepting responsibility. Why? Because you're leaving it in a place that isn't the place where things are normally watched. You meet a guy in the street. He says, "Can you watch this?" You say, "Leave it." Well, the street is not a place that's watched. If you tell him to leave it in your property, so your property is bas naturi, it's a place that's watched. Therefore, you accept responsibility. The marketplace is not a place where things are watched. When he tells him to leave it, he means to say, leave it and you watch it. I'm not taking responsibility. Inami, or alternatively, on the flip side, in a courtyard, there's two steps. Number one, do I have permission to leave it there? Number two, are you accepting responsibility? So Rabbi says each step is on its own. Even if you get permission to leave it there in the courtyard, meaning you leave it there and you watch, the owner is responsible to watch it, unless he specifically gets permission, not only to leave it there, but also that the owner of the property will watch it, not the owner of the item. But over here, it could be that telling him to leave it there is in effect telling him that I'm going to watch it. Why? In a public property, you don't need the guy's permission to leave it there. The guy can't give you permission anyway. Rebbe's whole argument is only in a private property where there's two stages. Number one, do I have permission to leave it there? Number two, are you watching it? So therefore, Rebbe says, look, you have to get both permissions. But over here, in our Mishnah, you don't need any permission, and the guy can't give you the permission anyway. So the only discussion here is about watching it. So maybe Rebbe would agree that where he says Hanach, put it down, he means Hanach, and I'll put it down and I will watch it. So we have an inconclusive. The Gemara's remains without a firm conclusion. Okay. Somebody who loans with collateral, he's considered a shemer sachar. So let's you have to try to understand why exactly the collateral is considered a shemer sachar. What benefit do you have from getting the collateral? Meaning, so you have a lender, because the lender gets a collateral, therefore he's considered a paid watchman. Why is he considered a paid watchman? So we'll have to go through it. We'll just point out the opinion of Rabbi Yehudah. Rabbi Yehudah says it depends whether you loan money or fruit. Okay, now recall that you're not allowed to lend fruit, right? That's called sabasah. The only exception to that is an exception what we call yeshlai. If the borrower has some fruit, he'd be allowed to borrow fruit. So, and obviously we're talking about such a scenario. The advantage of lending fruit is that you're locking in. Fruit normally spoils. Mm-hmm. So person would want to lend out his fruit. And therefore, that benefit that you derive from the loan, the fact that your loan is not going to spoil anymore. If you don't lend out the fruit will spoil. If you lend it out, well, now it won't spoil anymore. Because the guy has to give you back new fruit. Right? He can't give you back the same fruit he gave you. Mm-hmm. That fruit will presumably have spoiled by then. So that small benefit is enough to transform you into a shomer sachar, into a paid watchman. So you're sort of gaining off the deal lending fruit. Okay. So loaning on collateral makes you shomer sachar. It seems that our mission is not like Rabbi Eliezer. The Tanya we learned. Somebody who lends his friend on a collateral, and then the collateral is lost. Yishba, his friend makes an oath, and he collects the money. Div Rabbi Eliezer, that's the opinion of Rabbi Eliezer. Okay. Again, according to Rabbi Eliezer, what is making an oath? What does it mean he's making an oath? It means he's a shemer chinam, right? This is geneva va'aveda. It was lost or stolen. A shemer chinam is exempt, so he makes an oath that he watched to the best of his ability, and then he collects the debt. Clearly, Rabbi Eliezer indicates that somebody who loans with collateral is a shemer chinam, not a shemer sachar, and that's why he would be exempt by making an oath that the item was lost. Rabbi Kiva, on the other hand, says, Rabbi Kiva says the borrower says to the lender, look, I made a deal with you that this collateral will be a stand-in for the loan. And if you lose the collateral, well, you lose the loan. You don't get anything. Yeah. We'll have to see, are we talking about a collateral which actually equals the value of the loan, or even if it's less than the value of the loan? Mm-hmm. It's still considered a stand-in. But let's say the loan of 1,000 coins was done in a document, and he leaves a collateral. Okay, and everyone agrees that if the collateral is lost, well, then the money, the entire value of the loan is lost as well. And let's explain why. In this scenario, if the loan was written into a document, so now, generally speaking, the debate previously is that a collateral is called a zichron dvarim. The collateral is not meant to be collected.
Okay.
It's not, you're not supposed to get your debt from the collateral, except if the debt is written into a document. The debt is written into a document, then it's expected that you'll collect the loan from the collateral. And therefore, both Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Kiva agree that if the guy loses, if the lender loses the collateral, he loses the entire loan. Yeah. Okay. Okay, so it seems like the Mishnah contradicts the opinion of Rabbi Eliezer. So the Gemara says, "I feel tamer Rabbi Eliezer." Could even be the opinion of Rabbi Eliezer. V'lo kasha, there's no contradiction. Kad shemishkanu b'shas halvasei, kad shemishkanu shaloi b'shas halvasei. So it would depend on when the collateral was given. Okay, meaning when the collateral was given at the time of the loan, it was given sort of as a collateral, not as without the expectation that the collateral might be collected on. However, if it was given after the loan, meaning they let's say they decided to make the guy pay, he refused to pay, and at some point Bezin was sick of it, so they went to his house and they took a collateral from him. That collateral is going to be taken as payment. It's it's not just a threat to the guy; it's potential to collect as well. So in that case, in a collectible collateral, it could be that Rabbi Eliezer would agree that the lender would have the status of Shemer Sachar. When the collateral is not collectible, meaning it's there just sort of like a threat or an expression of sincerity, so then we consider the owner to be a Shemer Chinam, an unpaid watchman, because he doesn't really plan on getting the collateral. But if he does plan on getting the collateral, then we consider him a paid watchman. There's just one problem here, which is that the implication of the Mishnah and Rabbi Eliezer is that both of them are talking about where the collateral was given at the time of the loan. That's the Gemara's question now. The implication of loaning with collateral implies that the loan was given, the collateral was given at the time of the loan. So that resolution is not going to fly. It's not difficult. There's no contradiction between Rabbi Eliezer and the Mishnah. It depends whether you loan money or whether you loan fruit. Where you loan money, so then there is no the lender does not accrue a benefit by having the collateral or by giving out the loan, and therefore he has the status of Shemer Chinam. Where he loans fruits, right? Of course, we're talking about a position of yeshlai. Otherwise, loaning fruit is not permitted. Sabasa is not permitted. So we're talking about sabasa with yeshlai, so it's permitted. Okay. However, in that case, there's an advantage to the loan. The lender here has the advantage that it extends how long his fruit is going to last. So it will last longer now because the guy is going to have to basically give new fruit. Okay, and therefore, that makes him a Shemer Sachar. So Gemara says you can't make that distinction. Our Mishnah is talking about fruit. Why? Because Rabbi Yehudah in the end of the Mishnah specifies this. Miditani Seifa, because the end of the Mishnah says, Rabbi Yehudah Aimer Halveo Mois Shemer Chinam, Halveo Pera Shemer Sachar. If you loan him money, then you're a Shemer Chinam, you're an unpaid watchman. If you loan him fruit, you're a paid watchman. Mechlal Tana Kamma Lo Shonilei. Evidently, the first opinion, the unauthored opinion in the Mishnah, the anonymous opinion, does not make this distinction. We're trying to make a distinction that the Mishnah is talking about where you loan fruit. It can't be the Mishnah is talking about loaning fruit, because the end of the Mishnah, Rabbi Yehudah says Rabbi Yehudah makes that distinction. Evidently, the first part of the Mishnah did not have that distinction. So the Gemara says, you're right. Kula Rabbi Yehudah, the whole Mishnah is Rabbi Yehudah, that's why the Mishnah is missing words. We'll add some words in. If he loans on collateral, he's a shemer sacher. But midvar, when is it true? Shehilveu Paris, where they loaned fruit. Aval hilveu mais. But if they loaned money, then shemer chinam, you're an unpaid watchman. Why? Rabbi Yehudah Aimer, hilveu mais shemer chinam, hilveu Paris shemer sacher. And the explanation of the Mishnah is based on this Rabbi Yehudah, that a loan of fruit is considered, makes you shemer sacher. So the Gemara says, if that's the case, ihachi kamala masisin like Rabbi Kiva. Well, then we have another problem. The problem is that the Mishnah is not like Rabbi Kiva. Let's explain. If the Mishnah is talking about a scenario of fruit, meaning, but if you loan money, you're a shemer chinam. Well, if that's the case, that contradicts the opinion of Rabbi Kiva, because Rabbi Kiva says you're not a shemer chinam. Again, Rabbi Kiva said that if you lose the collateral, well, then you lose the whole loan. Even though you lost it, shemer chinam is exempt from losing things. You wouldn't have to pay. So clearly the Mishnah is not like Rabbi Kiva. Yes, indeed, the Mishnah is not like Rabbi Eliezer. Too bad. Why do we prefer having the Mishnah like Rabbi Kiva over Rabbi Eliezer? So if you look at Rashi in the Sanhedrin, all the Stam Mishnahs were all either Stam Sifri, Rabbi Yehudah, Stam Sifra, Rabbi Yehudah, Stam Sifri, Rabbi Shimon, Stam Mishnah is Rabbi Meir, and all of them going with the opinion of Rabbi Kiva. If you recall, we're like by now, right? Rabbi Kiva lost 25,000 Talmudim, but he had 5 Talmudim left, right?
Mm-hmm. Right.
Can you remember who they are? Is Rabbi Meir, Rabbi Yehudah, Rabbi Shimon?
Not Rabbi Eliezer.
I believe Rabbi Eliezer as well. That would be Rabbi Elizabeth Horkins to learn Rabbi Kiva. And the missing one. Rabbi Shimon, by the way, would be Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, and maybe Rabbi Nechemia as well. Regardless, all these are students of Rabbi Kiva. So all the Mishnayos basically, in effect, are the students of Rabbi Kiva according to Rabbi Kiva's own opinion. So we'd much prefer having a Mishnah not like Rabbi Eliezer than not like Rabbi Kiva. Okay. Fine. So the Gemara says, let's suggest that this debate of Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Kiva is dependent on the understanding of Shmuel. Okay, well, what does Shmuel say? A guy lent 1,000 coins to his friend. Kata de Megillah is a handle, a sickle handle. Yeah. So you think that a handle of a sickle is probably not worth 1,000 coins.
Right.
Fair enough? Okay. So Avad Kata de Magla, you lost the handle of the sickle. Avdu Alpha Zuzi, you lose all 1,000 coins. Okay. So let's explain. In a scenario where the collateral is not worth the amount of money that you borrowed, everybody agrees. Everybody disagrees with Shmuel. 1 second.
No, they do not accept Shmuel's. All agree they do not accept Shmuel's law.
1 second. 1 second. 1 second. Slight variation in texture. Okay, 1 second. Okay, let's sort of summarize it outside. So basically, okay, so what's the debate? According to Rabbi Kiva, Rabbi Kiva, it seems, holds of Shmuel's opinion, right? So Rabbi Kiva says that because we have a small collateral, Rabbi Kiva says you lose the collateral, you lose everything. And Rabbi Eliezer disagrees. So it seems that the debate here is about Shmuel. And the Gemara rejects that. The Gemara says no. It could be, 1 second. And the Gemara rejects that, and the Gemara concludes, even the Shavi Mashkin Shirzuz the Kula Alma less to the Shmuel. If we're talking about a scenario where there isn't, where the value of the, if we're talking about again. Initially, the Gemara proposes that the debate here is a debate of Shmuel. According to Shmuel, if the collateral is not worth the same amount of money as the loan, then still, if the collateral is not worth the same amount of money as the loan, according to Rabbi Kiva, you lose the whole loan, even though it's a negligible. The collateral is a negligible value. According to Rabbi Eliezer, you have to make an oath because you're a shomer. Okay, so but then the Gemara rejects, and the Gemara says it could be that everybody, if it's worth less than the loan, everybody disagrees with Shmuel that you would have, meaning you'd still have to give the guy a full payment. Over here, we're talking about where the collateral, in the scenario of the debate between Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Kiva, we're talking about where the collateral is worth the full amount of the loan. And the debate here is about the opinion of Rabbi Yitzchak. The Amar of Yitzchak, minayin lebachayev shekana mashkin, shenemar lachot hi yitztaka. Amein kainim mashkin stak minayin minolei. Kan lebachayev shekana mashkin. So let's explain here. Rabbi Yitzchak has this famous opinion throughout Talmud that a lender owns the collateral. Okay, why? Because the Torah talks about a collateral that's collected by a member of the court. In other words, the guy refused to pay or didn't pay, and the court went and took a collateral to make sure he pays. And the guy's a very poor person. He only has two pairs of clothing, a day clothing and a night clothing. So the Torah says that at the end of the day, you give him back his day clothing, you switch it out for his night clothing. Sorry. At the end of the day, you give him back his night clothing and you collateralize his day clothing. At the end of the night, you collateralize his night clothing, you give him back his day clothing. And the Torah says if you do this, you'll be righteous. You'll do tzedakah, charity. Now, if you don't actually own the collateral, it's not a charity.
Oh, right.
It must be that you actually do own the collateral. And that's why it's a charity that you're giving him back something that you really own. That's the opinion of Rabbi Yitzchak. So now let's analyze this. According to Reb Akiva, that basically the collateral substituted for the loan, Reb Akiva goes to Rabbi Yitzchak. He says that you actually own the loan, you own the collateral, and that's why it's considered effectively if you lose it, well, you lost your loan. And according to Rabbi Elazar would disagree with Rabbi Yitzchak. So Gemara says, "Tizbara, does anyone disagree with Rabbi Yitzchak? Rabbi Yitzchak, like we pointed out, is talking about where the loan is given when not at the time, where the collateral is given not at the time of the loan. Like we said, an agent of the court came to confiscate it. Did Rabbi Yitzchak make a statement at the time the loan was given? If the collateral was given not at the time of the loan, everyone agrees to Rabbi Yitzchak that you actually own the lender owns the collateral. We're talking about where the collateral happened at the time of the loan. And we're talking about the question here is the status of a watchman, of the status of the halachic framework in which somebody finds a lost object. By Meisha Aveda. Shomer Aveda Kamiflagi. In other words, what's the story of the Shomer Aveda? The Itmar we learned. Shomer Aveda. Rabba Omar, Rabba says, Kishomer Chinam, you're an unpaid watchman. Because if you find a lost object and you're looking for the owner, until the point that you find the owner, you're an unpaid watchman. Rav Yosef says, Kishomer Sachar, you're like a paid watchman. Okay. So Lema, okay. Now, so according to Rabbi says you're like a shomer chinam, you're like an unpaid watchman. That's clearly Rabbi Eliezer's opinion, right? And now Rav Yosef says you're like a paid watchman. Rav Yosef, we can say, is the opinion of Rabbi Kiva, right? Rav Yosef says you're like a paid watchman, so you have responsibility if it's lost. Similarly, if you have a collateral, you have the responsibility of the item. So Gemara says, Rav Yosef Tanai. Let's say that Rav Yosef's opinion is debate. Gemara says, Loi. Now, let's understand Rav Yosef. Why does Rav Yosef say you're like a paid watchman? It's a very interesting feature here. It's something called an Isaac b'mitzvah potter min mitzvah. We discussed this briefly earlier in the Masechta and other places as well. If you're in the middle of doing a mitzvah, you're exempt from doing another mitzvah. So, for example, if you're in the middle of saying Shema and a poor person knocks on your door, you have no obligation to answer the door. Similarly, if you have the phone book in front of you and you're trying to figure out, who Mr. Cohn is, you're calling up every Mr. Cohn in the book to see which Mr. Cohn lost this item, because the item says it's owned by Mr. Cohn. So then you're engaged in a mitzvah of returning a lost object. And if a poor person knocks on your door, you're exempt. You don't have to knock. You don't have.
Question for you. What's a phone book?
It's a thing that I don't know. I just heard it from my grandparents.
What's a phone book?
What's a phone book?
An unpaid watchman. Okay, so Yosef says basically the fact that you have this benefit that you're sitting out, that you're exempt from giving the poor person a coin, that makes him into a shomer sachar. It's as if you're a paid watchman. And Rabba basically says it's not significant. Okay. So the Gemara says, "Lo, b'shem Rabbi Rav Yosef, everyone could agree to Rav Yosef, even Rabbi Eliezer, and that's because a watchman, a guy who's watching a lost object, he's doing a mitzvah. But on the other hand, the guy who takes the collateral is not doing a mitzvah. And over here, the debate here is whether or not the lender is allowed to use the collateral, and that the use of that collateral will decrease the value of the loan. Rabbi Kiva says basically that you've done a mitzvah by loaning him the money and a mitzvah by engaging with this collateral and renting it out and decreasing the loan. And therefore, because you're doing a mitzvah, so you're exempt from other mitzvahs, and therefore you're considered a shomer sachar with the same logic as Rav Yosef. Just like Rav Yosef says that watching a found object makes you a shomer sachar because of this interesting halachic feature that you're exempt from giving money to a poor person. So Rabbi Kiva says same thing over here. If you give a loan to a poor person and you take his collateral and you rent it out, so in effect you're sort of helping the guy, and that assistance that you're giving him exempts you from giving money to a poor person while you're engaged in these actions, and therefore you're considered like a paid watchman. Rabbi Eliezer says, no, you're acting in your own self-interest. You would rather have a more secure loan, and that's why you want to rent out the collateral, because you obviously you're more secure that you're going to get your payment back. Therefore, you're not doing a mitzvah. You're not exempt from giving a coin to a poor person, and therefore you are a shomer chinam, an unpaid watchman. Okay, on the same subject, Abishol says it's permitted to rent out a collateral and use the rental income to decrease the value of the loan. Rav Chanan bar Ami Amar Shmuel. Rav Chanan bar Ami says the name of Shmuel. Halacha Abishol. The halacha follows the opinion of Abishol. However, big caveat here: the Av Abishol le'Amar el b'mora upesel v'kardim. Abishol only permitted it in these three examples. Mora is like a shovel. Pesel is an adze, or type of axe or a digging item. The kardim, a kardim is a cutting utensil. It's like a cutter. Hoyel v'nofish agrayo v'zutir pachsayo. These are things that are lucrative to rent out, but yet they have a very long lifespan. They don't wear down very quickly. So every person would want these things to be rented out. These are ideal for rentals, for equipment rentals.
It's not a new Scrabble word for the Z.
Okay.
Remember that.
Hamaver chavas nimakam l'makam. A guy moves his barrel from place to place. The shavra, and so he hires workers to move the barrel, and he broke it. Ben shemer china, ben shemer sachar, yishbar. Whether the guy was a paid or an unpaid watchman, he makes an oath and he's exempt. Okay, meaning that the fact that he tripped over and knocked over the barrel, that's considered an eines, beyond his control. But if you remember, you're looking at me, you remember that we had a Bava Kamma, right? We had a whole sugya in Bava Kamma called Niskal Peshehu. Are you guilty for tripping and falling? We'll get to it. Okay, Rabbi Eliezer says Zev Zeh Yishba. Rabbi Eliezer says that they both make an oath. However, but it makes no sense to me that they can both make an oath. Rabbi Eliezer thinks that they're pretty guilty. He agrees that the tradition, the accepted position of the rabbis was to make an oath, but it made no sense to him. So let's expand on this. Tana Rabbanan, the rabbis taught him. A guy was carrying a barrel from place to place, v'shover, and it broke. Bein shemer chinam, bein shemer sachar yishba. Both the shemer chinam, a paid and unpaid watchman, they both make an oath. Divrei Meir, it's the opinion of Meir. She's exactly the same as the unauthored opinion of the Mishnah. The anonymous opinion of the Mishnah is Rameir, which is exactly what it usually is. Rabbi Yehudah says he starts making a distinction. Shemer chinam, if you're an unpaid watchman, yishba, you make an oath. However, if nice sachar, you're a paid watchman, then you shala, and then you have to pay. It's sort of a minor form of negligence, such that a shemer chinam is exempt, but a shemer sachar would be liable.
He's just a klutz.
So we got
Klutz that just accidentally.
okay. We'll get to it.
Okay. Oh.
Rabbi Eliezer says Zev Zeh Yishba. They both make an oath. However, to me, I need Mechalim Zev Shava, but it makes no sense to me. How could they both make an oath? We'll explain that as well. So let's start. Remember the Savar Rameir Niskalaf B'Shehu. Rameir clearly holds that someone who's niskal, a guy who tripped, is not a klutz. Not only that, he's an einus. It's beyond anything he can do to prevent himself from tripping. That's the opinion of Rameir. But Tanya, the problem is that we have a brayso that contradicts this. Nishbra kadai v'loy silkai. A guy trips and falls. His barrel breaks. It's full of honey. He got a massive pile of honey in the middle of the street, right? Nafla gamlai, or his camel fell down. V'loy hamida, he didn't stand it up. Reb Meir mechayev bezekan v'chachamim potter. Reb Meir says you're liable for the damage, and the rabbis say you're exempt. Here is we have a contradiction here. Reb Meir is saying that a guy who trips is not responsible for his actions. In our mission, that's why he makes an oath and he's exempt. But with regard to digging the pit is not a pit. It's a pile of honey on the street. It's the same idea though. Right. Same stumbling block. Then Reb Meir says, "Oh, niska pashehu, you're guilty. You're responsible. Which is it? Are you klutz for falling or not?" So Amar Belazar Tavra, you got to break the Mishnah. Misha Shanazu, Lo Shanazu. The Mishnah and the Brisa are of separate authorships. There's two opinions about what Rameir says. Okay. Yehudah says, Shemerchinam Yishba Nesasachar Yishalom. Hai Kedini v'Hai Kedine. Rabbi Yehudah says that this is sort of partial negligence. Partial negligence, Shemerchinam is exempt, just like he's exempt for losing it. Losing it is partial negligence, right? And stolen here means it's stolen in a situation with partial negligence as well, but it's not gross negligence. So therefore, Shemer Chinam is exempt. You make an oath and you're exempt, but a Shemer Sachar has to pay. But also, Rabbi Eliezer comes along and says, in Gemara Kramer, the truth of the matter is that we've learned the law follows Rameir. However, miut miani, it makes no sense to me. If they can both make an oath. Let's explain. I can understand why a Shemer Chinam would make an oath because he's not grossly negligent. Even without gross negligence, he's still liable. He's a nice sacher. He's a paid watchman. A paid watchman has liability. And even a shemer chinam, you'll tell me that he's not liable. Well, I can understand that if he was sort of, traversing a glacier, it was hard, so he tripped and fell. He was walking on a slanty piece of land, traversing a slanty hill. Okay, I get it why he can fall. But if he's not walking in a steep place, it seems that this is negligence. He's walking on a flat surface and he tripped. How did that happen? Nami. And I'm not going to give in to you even on a slanty hill that he's traversing. I'm also not going to give in. Why? Like a real. This is all true if nobody saw him fall. But if somebody saw him fall, then you don't make an oath. You bring in the witnesses. The Tanya we learned. The Tanya we learned. Isi ben Yehudah says, "Ein raya shvuas Hashem tiyeh bein shneim." If nobody saw the item being lost, which is typically the case, right? If people saw the item being lost, and it's typically not lost. So, right. So ein raya, nobody saw it. That's when you make an oath. But hayesh raya, chapters is 50K, right?
Yes.
50.
Hayesh raya. But if there was a watchman, then yavi raya v'yiftar. Then bring the if not a watchman. If there was witnesses, then bring the witnesses. Meaning, if a shomer chino, you have an unpaid watchman, he's walking down the street and he's mugged. Okay, now he is a little guilty for being mugged. You know, he had his big lighter stuck in his jacket. It was pretty obvious what he was carrying. You know, well, okay, he's not grossly negligent, so he's exempt, and he doesn't make an oath because we have witnesses that saw him being mugged. It's only where we don't have witnesses that's when he has to make an oath. But even if the guy's walking sideways on a hill, you think there are no witnesses. In English, Rabbi Dovid is saying, look, in the vast majority of circumstances, there's no reason for anyone to make an oath here in the first place. Now, it's true that is what the tradition has taught, but I don't understand it. It makes no sense to me. A noisy sacher, a paid watchman should have to pay, not make an oath. And an unpaid watchman, in most circumstances, is either guilty or not making an oath because people saw. Okay. Okay, let's stop here. It's really hanging in the middle, but okay. We'll review again tomorrow.
The exciting ending.
Okay, and then begin an interesting Gemara. Or a little Agatha Gemara. Oh, there you are. Okay, thank you. Rabbi Yehudah, Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Shimon.